Hello everybody, Russian Batman back with another video, and today's video we're going to be doing a little comparison. So as you read from the title, in this video I am going to be comparing Rattlesnake Jake to the wolf from Puss in Boots, The Last Wish. So before I get into any of the discussion or comparison, I would just like to say off the bat that this video does have spoilers for both the 2011 film Rango and Puss in Boots The Last Wish. So please go watch those two movies. Go watch 2011 film Rango. Go watch Puss in Boots The Last Wish before watching this video, just so you don't get it spoiled. And yes, I am going to go into spoilers, a full spoiler warning. So let's get in to the video. So first off, why did I decide to compare these two specific villains? Well, one, these two villains at this point are probably my two favorite villains of all time, if I'm being honest. I've always loved Rattlesnake Jake. Thought he was a great villain. I've made an entire video about Rattlesnake Jake, which you could watch in the description. It was part of the One Villainous Scene, so it's me analyzing the first scene that Rattlesnake Jake is in. So go watch that video. It's a pretty good video. And then everything else on the One Villainous Scene playlist is also pretty good. So that's that. And then also the wolf, which again I put the spoiler warning earlier, which is revealed to be Death, is also a very intimidating, great villain. Also, I believe these two villains are actually a lot more similar than you might think. For one, I consider both these villains to be mostly character villains. What I mean by character villains, I mean the villains, the threat they serve is not a threat to the plot, but is more of a threat to the individual character. In the case of, and it's very obvious in the case of Death, right? Death, in Puss in Boots, he never even talks to any other character besides Puss. He only wants to kill Puss. His only motivation is to kill Puss. And similar in Rango, where Rattlesnake Jake, sure, he's hired by the main, the mayor, but his primary objective in the story is to belittle Rango and put Rango down. He doesn't really have any personal gain from taking over the city of Dirt, besides it just being, kind of another payroll, I guess. So his primary goal in the plot is to be a antagonist for Rango specifically, because he believes that Rango is a fraud. And same with, like I said, both of these villains, they both believe that the main protagonist is a fraud, and that's their main motivation.
All you've done is lie to these good people. You ain't nothing but a fake and a coward. Isn't that right?
I find the very idea of 9 lives absurd, and you didn't value any of them.
In the case of Puss in Boots, Death believes that that Puss doesn't take his life seriously, doesn't value his life. He thinks he's a fraud and he wants him gone. Same with in Rango, Rattlesnake Jake thinks Rango is a fraud, is a liar, and wants to take him down because of it, right? They don't want any external gain from it. They just believe the protagonist is a fraud, and they're willing to do whatever to get rid of them, basically, right? And yeah, then also both of these villains also have kind of a moral code, right? Both of these villains, they're not unreasonable. At the end of the movie, they're not unreasonable, and they're also pretty much unstoppable, right? In the case of Puss in Boots, at the end of the movie, Puss even admits that he knows he can't defeat Death, right? But throughout that fight, he demonstrates that he is willing to protect his one last life, and that he does value his life, right? By not taking the wishes. So he demonstrates to the wolf that he's changed, and then the wolf lets him go because of his moral compass.
Live your life, Puss in Boots. Live it well. You know we will meet again, right?
Sí, hasta la muerte.
Although, despite the fact, he is still very, very evil and intimidating. The same thing goes with Rattlesnake Jake. At the end of the movie, once Rango proves that he is the hero, that he can be a hero, and that he knows how to protect the people he loves, Rattlesnake Jake sees that he's not just a coward anymore. Once he sees it in his eyes at that last scene, he lets him go.
I tip my hat to you. One legend to another.
Right? And so both these villains are both unstoppable. They never get defeated by the the heroes. The heroes don't really traditionally beat them up and defeat them. The heroes more just prove to the villains that they are not what the villains think they are. Once or prove to the villains that they have changed. So that's why I wanted to compare these villains, because I think these are just excellent villains. They're not traditional villains, and they're not even the main villains of their respective movies. I would argue that in the case of Rango, it's obviously the mayor, and I would argue in the case of Puss in Boots, it would actually be more Jack Horner, because Jack Horner is the character who wants to take all the magic. He wants to stop everyone else from getting the wish. He has a motive that more directly affects the wider world, and something that's more stoppable, like this villain is gonna take over the world or whatever. Something that's a bit more stoppable. In the case of Rango, it's the mayor wants to take over the town, right? They want to do something that that is in the conflict to the wider world and not in conflict with the specific character. That's why you have the secondary villain who has a direct conflict with the main protagonist. So there's a character villain and then there's a plot villain, right? That's how I kind of like to categorize it. So I want to talk about these two character villains. And how are we going to determine which one is better? Well, thank you for asking. I have made up 5 kind of categories. I'm going to compare the two villains in and see which one beats out which. So the 5 categories I've made, so I'm looking at this piece of paper that I've made, is the character's design, the character's performance, the character's intro scene, the character's conclusion scene, the concluding fight scene, basically, and then the effect the villain has on the protagonist. So I made sure it's 5, so there wouldn't be an even amount, and so we would have a definitive, wanted to figure out who is the better, I would say, character villain. So let's get straight into that. Okay, so first off, we have the character designs. Just to go over both of them real quick, the wolf, or aka Death, is basically a combination of kind of like a wolf, the big bad wolf from fairy tales, and the Grim Reaper. When he's introduced, he's just a bounty hunter, but you can see he has these dark kind of robes on. He has these 2 sickles, not scythe sickles, but they can combine to this weird scythe weapon that spins around, which is really cool. Has these really intimidating red eyes, and he's a white wolf, so it contrasts with his kind of black not his black cape thingy he has going on, and yeah, which is really cool. I do believe his design is really intimidating and invokes kind of the feelings of death and symbolism, like being a white wolf and whatnot, and different things like that. And Rattlesnake Jake's design, in contrast, is a giant-ass rattlesnake with a Gatling gun for instead of a rattle. So yeah, that's his design, and he also has a giant hat, guns all around him. So for the designs of the character, it's a no-brainer. I have to give this one to Rattlesnake Jake. Like I said, he is a giant-ass rattlesnake with a Gatling gun for a tail, okay? I'm sorry, you just can't beat that, no matter who it is. The wolf's design is great, but I think Rattlesnake Jake is just better. He has, like I said, he has bullets all around him. He has this giant hat on, that's your Western hat. Also, like, some other cool details is that if you look closely at his mouth, it kind of looks like he has a bit of a mustache, He has the, where his scales are, he doesn't actually have actual hair, but it's an indication of like a thin, villainous mustache. So you get that Western feel with it being a giant-ass snake with a Gatling gun. So I give this first point goes to Rattlesnake Jake. Alright, next up is we have the performance, which this one's a lot closer. I think both of their performances are excellent. I don't off the top of my head remember who actually plays the wolf from Puss in Boots, but I do know who plays Rattlesnake Jake, and that is actually Bill Nye. Now, not Bill Nye the Science Guy, Bill Nye the actor. He's also the same person, I believe, who played Davy Jones from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. So when I mean performance, I'm mostly talking about vocal performance, because this is an animated movie. With the wolf, he definitely has that kind of, like, little bit of a gravelly voice with a slight Spanish accent added on there.
If it isn't Puss in Boots himself. In the flesh. Can I get your autograph? Been following you for a long time. I just love the smell of fear.
He also does frequently throughout the movie, you know, use Spanish words,
Corre, corre, gatito.
which makes sense because the movie takes place in Spain. I think for the most part it takes place in Spain. I know Puss in Boots is Spanish, right? And the first city they're in is in Spain. It's a little bit confusing in the lore, like why specifically death would be Spanish, or maybe this is just Puss's interpretation of death, so that's why he's Spanish. But either way, he is Spanish. I do think it adds an extra layer of cool, you know, evil kind of Spanish-speaking villain. I don't know, but it's there, and I think it's pretty cool. And he has an intimidating voice. However, I definitely think Rattlesnake Jake's is better. Rattlesnake Jake just has that, like, you listen to him and you're scared, right? It is that deep southern evil accent, you know. And Rattlesnake Jake just in the movie has so many cold lines.
Go ahead, hero. Pull the trigger. You got killer in your eyes, son. I don't see it. What was that you said? Pretty soon, no one will believe you even existed. Sign the damn paper, woman.
Go to hell.
Where do you think I come from? Look into my eyes. I want to see you die.
I know in the Puss in Boots, Death has some cold lines in there, but I feel Rattlesnake Jake with the vocal performance is just far better. The only critique I would actually ever have of the wolf is that I think the wolf's voice could be a bit gravelier, you know, more intimidating. It could be a bit deeper. It could be these things, which, you know, I'm fine with how it is, but I don't think it's as intimidating as Rattlesnake Jake. You know, pull the trigger. You ain't got the nerve. You know, and it's so good. And props to the actor. I think the actor is phenomenal. He also did a phenomenal job as Davy Jones. I think he is just a perfect villain actor. No, like I said, I'm not trying to take shots at the actor who plays the wolf, or, you know, Death. But I think he does a great job as Death. But I don't think it nearly compares to the vocals of Rattlesnake Jake. So the second point, I'm also gonna have to give it to Rattlesnake Jake if I'm being honest. I think just the vocal performance alone is just super impressive. So that's who the second point goes to. This the third one is we have the introduction scene. Now I actually did an entire video on Rattlesnake Jake's introduction scene, so I'm not gonna go over it that much. I'm gonna a little bit briefly, and just to, you know, as a little brief, the introduction to Rattlesnake Jake starts where there's no water and dirt, and basically Rango is saying, hey, as long as that sign's up, we have hope. And then Rattlesnake Jake comes and kind of just destroys that hope. He belittles Rango, exposes Rango as a liar, because throughout the entire movie, Rango was hyping himself up to be his hero, and also told everyone that he's Rattlesnake Jake's brother. Oh, I know Jake. All these things, and then he just all kind of crumbles down in this one scene where Rattlesnake Jake exposes it all. He has some really cold lines. You know, Rango claimed that he's immune to Rattlesnake Jake's blood. So Rattlesnake Jake, the first thing he goes up to him, and he says, "Thirsty brother," and he like gives him a shot of his poison, which is really cold. And also when Rattlesnake Jake, you know, he gives Rango a gun, removes all the bullets except for one, and gives it to him, and puts the gun directly to his head, and says, "Pull the trigger. You ain't got the nerve." So lines like that, like I said, is why, you know, I put him in the performance category, and why I think he is better in that sense. Now, with the wolf, or aka Death, the first scene you see him in is the scene early on in the movie where Puss, you know, he dies for the 8th time and finds out that basically he dies for the 8th time and finds out he's on his last life, but he refuses to retire, and he goes to this bar to drink some milk. So And then that's when Death kind of appears out of nowhere in the frame, in which we don't know he's Death yet. We just see it's the wolf, and Puss in the beginning of the wolf's, he thinks it's just some weird fan because he asked for an autograph. Then he shows the wanted poster, and then Puss realizes like this is probably just a bounty hunter, and then goes to fight him, but then he immediately clashes his sword away. And that whole intro scene, you've probably seen many videos talking about that first scene and why it's so great. And if I'm being honest, I agree, and I think this scene, although I've sung the praises about Rattlesnake Jake before, I think this scene works a lot better as an intro scene to the main villain. For once, it takes place a lot earlier in the movie. It's at the beginning of the movie, where Rattlesnake Jake's introduced towards the end of the movie and has a lot less time to, be as great. Where the wolf, he appears through little scenes in the middle of the movie, then at the end, but in the beginning as well. So he's like there throughout the entire movie. Obviously not like doesn't have that much screen time, but still I think because that intro scene happens a lot earlier, and also I just think it's so much. I think it's really cool how he just appears out of nowhere. He has that whistle. I think it just works a lot better because also it does a lot, I think, better of a job of establishing how powerful the wolf is. Because you're putting him up against Puss in Boots, right? Puss in Boots, the same Puss in Boots who just seen earlier defeated this entire giant, saved this town from a giant, and want to have this huge fiesta, and all of this sort of thing. All these things, right? That establishes Puss to be this like legendary hero, to immediately just get smacked down by this villain. Where in the case of Rango is not really established to be that great of a hero. We already kind of know he's a fraud. It's just Rattlesnake Jake exposes that to the rest of the characters, which is impactful for the character. But for I would say the bigger kind of shock, there's not really that much of a shock for the audience, because let's be honest, these liar reveals are very common in animated movies. And so I would say the intro to the wolf in this movie, I think, works a lot better to establish a very, very unstoppable and powerful villain. So I am gonna give the intro category to the wolf from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Next up is we have the conclusion, the scene that wraps it all up. Both these scenes towards the end of the movie, and it's mostly a fight between the hero and the villain. So yeah, in the case of, like I said, Puss in Boots, you have the final fight, and it's honestly incredible. Death walks in with his two kind of sickles, strikes him against the floor, and makes this like kind of flame wall, so it encases just Puss. So it really, like I said, that really shows how it's a character villain. It excludes all the other characters for just this one fight, and has this red flaming background, and it has, and it has the wolf, and it has Puss, and it's just them fighting, and it's honestly incredible. The animation is incredible. The just everything about it, I think, is great. And then I would say, same thing for the final battle with Rattlesnake Jake. It's very inventive and creative, and it plays to the, Western stuff he does, like the one bullet thing, right? They have this final shoot off, right? But in this case, it definitely does include a lot more of the external forces, right? There's a whole plan behind it. They have, a fake eagle come in, and there's a lot more steps to it, right? It's not as straightforward as a 1v1 fight. So it does, play to more of Rango's strength, because in the movie, Rango really isn't a traditional fighter, right? He's not that skilled with a gun, but he knows how to kind of give an illusion. So he plays to that a little bit, right? He makes the illusion of the eagle coming in. He sets up traps, He shows that he's not a traditional hero, but he can still help the people he loves. Which I think it's great that he plays to his strength. And same, in the case of Puss in Boots, Puss, he's a traditional fighter. He plays towards his strength as well. So which scene do I think? Well, I think there's some pivotal moments in this scene, right? the pivotal moment I like in both of these is the last stare down. They both have this incredible stare down towards the end, where Puss is looking in the eyes of death and not showing fear, and Rango is looking directly in the eyes of Rattlesnake Jake and not showing any fear.
It only takes one bullet. You ain't got the nerve. Try me.
You know, you just see in Rattlesnake Jake's eyes after Rango said that, he's just, you know, kind of shocked that, you know, you could see that he realizes that Rango has actually, you know, kind of developed and whatnot. But if I were to be very honest in which of these scenes as a whole is better, I'm actually gonna have to give this one to Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I think it's a lot more enclosed, right? And I think it's just a lot more, if I'm being honest, just a more satisfying fight. It's a more traditional fight. You know, you have a lot of really, you got a lot of really good moments, especially, I think one of the key lines, not Rango, Puss says is when he I thought it was really sad, when he kicks the scythe back to Death and he says, pick it up. Because towards the beginning of the movie, you know, the wolf, you know, humiliates Puss by kicking the sword to him and telling him to pick it up, basically giving the weapon back so the fight can last longer. And after, like I said, kind of Puss kind of bests him, he kicks the scythe back and he says, pick it up. And you can tell, like I said, similar in the case of, it's very similar to Rango, but then you can see in Wolf's eyes, he realizes in that moment that he is actually willing to fight for his life and that he has changed. And then he does a little stare off and then he gets all mad and he's like, you know what, you're not the same person, it's not worth it. And he goes off, kind of earning the wolf's respect. But I think it's just a lot more of I think the scene's a lot more satisfying in the case of Puss in Boots. Now, it could go either way. Even talking about it now, I'm kind of, you know, debating if I've made the right choice, but I'm still gonna give this to Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I think it's just a lot more satisfying, although the really cold line with Rango at the end is really good, but there is a little bit of filler in there. It's not one continuous scene. It's not enclosed between just Rango and Rattlesnake Jake. There are some external forces. If it was more enclosed, I would like it, because that's what this one kind of does. It really forces the hero and the villain just to be in one scene together, and like I said, the one enclosed room and whatnot, and I think it works phenomenally. Okay, last but certainly not least, if you've counted up to this point, we actually do have, this is a little bit unintentional, but we have, you know, 2 and 2. So Rattlesnake Jake has 2 points, and Rango and Death has 2 points. So who is gonna win this? Well, it's up to this 5th and final category, and is the effect the villain has on the hero. And this one's arguably one of the most important. Obviously, the goal of any villain in any story is to, you know, drive the hero to become better, and both of these villains do that excellently, right? And like I said, towards the end of the movie, and they do it in a way, like I said, they prove them, they have to, you know, belittle the hero, but this also causes the heroes to become better and then prove themselves to the villain, and then the villain kind of lets them go. And the villain never, like I said, gets downgraded or anything. The villain stays kind of the same amount of power. However, it's the hero that kind of improves to overcome their own flaws and earn the respect of the villain. So the effect they have on the hero, like I said, is mostly to, like I said, belittle them so they can grow afterwards. In the case of Rango, after the first scene they meet, this is when Rango, in a depressed state, leaves the city of dirt in a very, I think this scene is very underrated, where he crosses the highway and is really kind of in a very depressed state. He crosses the highway. He isn't even worried about the cars running him over. Once he crosses the highway, which also in the movie kind of symbolizes death in a little bit, that he crosses the highway, he kind of faints, and then he gets, you know, picked up by the, is really ethereal. It's a strange movie. The animation is definitely weird. But, you know, this is when he's, you know, broken and exposed to all of his friends as a fraud, and realizing that, you know, maybe he can't be a hero. You know, he's thinking, well, you know, he tries to act like a hero, but maybe he's like, well, maybe I just can't be one, right? And this is when he gets broken down and, you know, has to discover himself again when he has that weird scene with this Clint Eastwood guy. The movie sounds weird. You should watch it. I really like it. Maybe it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I think it's really good. And he gets broken down, and he has to basically, you know, build himself up again after he gets that pep talk from the Clint Eastwood, basically, right? And so that's kind of the effect it has on Rango. However, in the case of Rango, it's more towards the end of the movie, and it's more like the third act liar reveal kind of thing, which is a little bit cliche, but I still think it works in the case of the movie, and it establishes how intimidating Rattlesnake Jake is. However, as I said, in the case of Puss in Boots, not only is it towards the beginning of the movie, however, it is also because that has you get to see the effect on Puss, I think, a bit more. You get to see not only the first scene where he is terrified of the wolf and for the first time runs away, you know, and they establish in the beginning of the film in this little song that Puss has never been touched by a blade. And the first encounter he has with the wolf, he gets hit with his blade and he actually bleeds. You actually see real blood smear on his face, and it's not like it's not fake or anything. It's obviously not super gory. It's still a kids movie, but still. And he, like I said, he runs away for the first time, and he is terrified for that first scene, right? And same throughout the movie. Like I said, there's a really good scene in the middle of the movie where Puss has an actual panic attack from just seeing the wolf. And it causes, you know, like I said, Puss to kind of go out of control, right? He doesn't get depressed. He is actually genuinely terrifying. That's the thing with the wolf in this movie, is he is out to kill Puss. He wants Puss to actually die. You know, he's an actual threat. Where in Rattlesnake Jake's case, sure, he doesn't like Puss. In Rattlesnake Jake, he doesn't like Rango, right, at all. He doesn't, you know, think Rango is worthy of his praise. However, he just wants to kick him out of the town. He doesn't actually want to kill him at first. He says if he comes back, he'll kill him, but he doesn't go to kill him. So there's not a sense of immediate fear. With the case of the wolf, there is a very big sense of immediate fear. If he's like, if I don't run away now, this guy is actually going to kill me because he is actually more skilled than I am. So, and it's through, like I said, and because it's in the beginning of the movie, it's throughout. Like, you got that panic attack scene towards the middle of the movie. You have, you know, a little bit in the beginning when they're robbing Jack Horner, the wolf appears again, and you can just see, you know, after the whistle, his hairs stand up on his back. There's so many little things to establish this, to show us that Puss is, for the first time ever, is genuinely terrified. And that is so impactful, and it also makes it a lot more impactful for when he finally defeats, you know, the wolf. In the case of Rango, I mean, you get the sense that, you know, he's a little bit depressed, but when he comes back, you know, he's good, and he overcomes, you know, kind of, you know, him being a liar and a fraud, but you don't get a sense that he really overcomes, you know, the fear of, you know, he is very, you know, in the scene, he's afraid of Rattlesnake Jake, but it's not to the same extent that is done masterfully in the case of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. So yes, that's who I give this last category to, the effect on the hero. I think it's a lot more impactful in the case of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish with death. So if you've counted up the points, you'll know that that the wolf has 3 points and Rattlesnake Jake has 2. So that's the winner of this video. So definitive answer of who's the better villain, in my opinion. Although I love Rattlesnake Jake to death, I think he is a great villain. I'm gonna have to give this one to Death. Death is by far, out of these two, the best, not by far, but, you know, is the best character villain. So yeah, those are my thoughts. If you have any other differing opinions, let me know in the comments below. Did I give some of these categories to the wrong people? Do you think maybe, maybe Wolf's, the Death's design you think is better than Rattlesnake Jake's design, or the performance of this is better than that? Let me know in the comments if you have any differing opinions. If you like the video, leave a like. Go watch the 2011 film Rango. It's a great movie. Go watch my other video on that Rango scene if you want to see more content kind of like this, discussing films. And yeah, go watch Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Great movie. And y'all, especially, just have a nice rest of the day. The rest of the content on this channel is mostly Lego stuff, but I do have, like I said, I have that other film-related thing about about Rattlesnake Jake. But yeah, y'all have a nice rest of the day, and see y'all later. Ciao. Bye-bye.